We are here at the entrance to the prison. Detained behind these walls, there are 189 men. Each of them has been sentenced to life.
Frozen, forgotten, feared by even the worst criminals. Deep in the Arctic Circle lies a prison so brutal, even cannibals and terrorists beg for the death sentence instead. Welcome to Polar Owl, Russia's coldest and most isolated supermax fortress, where the punishment isn't just isolation, it's survival. How can a place be worse than execution? What kind of torture breaks the most violent men without ever laying a hand on them? And why has no one ever escaped? We're about to take you inside a frozen hell of iron doors, psychological warfare, and deadly temperatures. Using real cases, survivor accounts, and state secrets, we'll reveal the system built to erase people without leaving a trace. Welcome to the edge of the earth. Buried deep within Russia's unforgiving Arctic Circle lies a place few have heard of, and even fewer return from. It's not just a prison. It's a remote stronghold built to swallow the worst criminals alive. This is Polar Owl, officially known as Penal Colony No. 18, and it's perched on the icy banks of the Sob River in Karp, a desolate town in the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug. There are no cities nearby, no roads connecting it to anything familiar, just endless tundra and the biting wind of the north. Getting there is an ordeal that breaks people long before they arrive. From Moscow, it takes a 2-day train ride just to reach the nearest station. Then comes a rough bus journey through snowbound wilderness, winding toward a facility surrounded by layers of reinforced steel fences and Arctic nothingness. Once you arrive, you're greeted not by guards, but by a massive stone sculpture of an owl with outstretched wings, perched like a frozen omen above the gates. That owl isn't just decoration, it's a warning. The climate around Karp is among the harshest on Earth. Temperatures can plummet to 50 degrees Celsius, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds slice through layers of clothing, and snow piles high enough to bury a man. It's so cold that even polar bears avoid the region. There is no spring thaw, no summer relief, only permafrost, and a sun that vanishes for weeks at a time during the long polar night. Inside this frozen wasteland, time seems to stop. For inmates sentenced to life here, it already has. This environment isn't just inhospitable, it's weaponized. The location was chosen not just for isolation, but as a psychological tool. Escaping Polar Owl is less an obstacle course and more a death wish. You could break through the iron doors, outsmart the guards, even scale the electric fences. But beyond those walls, nothing but sub-zero hell. No cover, no food, no people. If the guards and dogs don't catch you, the cold surely will. And yet, the isolation is just the first layer of punishment. The psychological effect of knowing there's nowhere to go, no warmth, no escape, no hope, is the real cage. Inmates are transported here, not just to be locked away, but to be erased. In most prisons, life continues in some form. Not here. In Polar Owl, life stops the moment the gates close behind you. Many of the inmates sent to Polar Owl don't even have family visits. Their relatives refuse to claim their bodies after death, leading to the creation of a lonely graveyard not far from the prison. A settlement of the forgotten, marked only by numbers and silence. In this way, Polar Owl doesn't just contain prisoners. It outlives them. Their lives, names, and crimes vanish into the snow. The facility's origins trace back to the Soviet era, when it was originally used as a forced labor camp. That legacy of brutality didn't disappear, it evolved. Today, Polar Owl is one of just 7 special regimen prisons in Russia. These aren't normal supermax prisons. They're psychological war zones designed specifically for the country's most dangerous and despised criminals. Serial slayers, terrorists, non-consensual offenders, and the politically inconvenient. But Polar Owl isn't infamous because of who it holds. It's infamous because of what it does to them. The prison has earned a reputation so terrifying that even those sentenced to die have begged not to be sent there. Because death, at least, is quick. Life in Polar Owl is slow. It's cold, and it's the end of everything familiar. Yet crossing into Polar Owl's gates is just the start. The real punishment begins inside, where the walls don't echo, because no one's allowed to speak. A tomb of iron and silence. From the outside, Polar Owl might look like just another high-security fortress hidden in the ice. But once you step through its triple-sealed steel gates, it becomes clear. This isn't just a prison, it's a tomb built for the living. Inside, silence rules. Movement is restricted, and time feels like it's been frozen along with the world outside. The architecture of Polar Owl is designed for absolute control. Each inmate is housed behind 3 layers of solid iron doors. Before reaching a prisoner's cell, a guard must pass through multiple checkpoints, each requiring keys, codes, and constant monitoring. The facility is surrounded by 5 rings of fencing, armed watchtowers, and Caucasian shepherd dogs trained to slay on command. These massive dogs patrol the perimeter relentlessly, their presence as much psychological as physical. They are not just deterrents, they are executioners waiting for a signal. Once inside, the cells themselves are nothing short of psychological weapons. Most are single occupancy, barely large enough to walk in a straight line. Some cells are so small that prisoners like Nurpashi Kulayev, one of the terrorists behind the Beslan school massacre, can't even lie down. They either stand or sit upright. Sleep, when it comes, happens slumped against a wall. A bed exists in each cell, but inmates are forbidden from using it until exactly 10 p.m. Anyone caught sitting or reclining during the day faces punishment. This strict control extends beyond the physical. Inmates are not allowed to speak, not to guards, not to one another. Communication is a punishable offense. Unlike Western prisons, where gangs form and alliances are forged, Polar Owl enforces total isolation. Even eye contact can result in being reported and disciplined. There are no shared cafeterias, no common spaces. Each prisoner eats alone, walks alone, suffers alone. Guards patrol constantly, making rounds every 15 minutes. But they're not checking in, they're checking for disobedience. Radios in the guards' rooms play select state-approved music and propaganda, sometimes loud enough for the inmates to hear, but never control. Movies are shown once a week, also chosen by the authorities, often to reinforce obedience or shame. The prison routine is engineered to remove all sense of individuality. Inmates must stand for hours each day, motionless. During the limited 90-minute exercise period, prisoners are marched single file to small outdoor cages. These areas are barely larger than the cells they sleep in. Concrete walls surround them, and a metal grate roof blocks the sky. It's not freedom, it's a different kind of confinement. And it's always cold. The silence of Polar Owl is deafening. Imagine going years, decades, without hearing a friendly voice or seeing an unguarded expression. This isolation is no accident. It's policy. Experts in human rights and prison reform call it psychological annihilation. The aim is not just to imprison, but to strip away every layer of humanity until all that remains is compliance and regret. There are no outbursts in Polar Owl, no riots, no escape plans whispered through walls. The punishment is so severe, so absolute, that even the most hardened slayers eventually break. Serial slayer Alexander Pichushkin, once cocky and cold-blooded, reportedly begged for death after months in isolation. His cellmate? Silence. It's easy to think of punishment as physical, chains, beatings, deprivation. But at Polar Owl, the true sentence is psychological silence, the crushing absence of sound, movement, connection. The human brain wasn't built to endure that. And that's exactly the point. Outside, the ice will slay you. Inside, the silence finishes the job. And for those still alive inside these iron walls, the worst is far from over. Prisoners who fear nothing, except this. What kind of place terrifies men who once showed no fear while committing unspeakable acts? Polar Owl is the rare prison where the inmates are so dangerous, so unrepentant, they seemed untouchable until they arrived. This Arctic fortress has a way of breaking even the most violent criminals, not through force, but through a slow, calculated erosion of the soul. And the stories of those locked inside prove just how far that destruction can go. Take Alexander Pichushkin, for example, known across Russia as the chessboard slayer. His dream? To slay 64 people, one for each square on a chessboard. When he was caught in 2006, he'd already slayed at least 48. Cold, cocky, and without a shred of remorse, he told reporters that if he were released, he'd start slaying again right away. But his bravado didn't last. Once sent to Polar Owl and placed in solitary confinement, Pichushkin transformed. The same man who once laughed about his crimes reportedly became withdrawn, anxious, and hollow. Later, he said living there was worse than being executed. "It would be better if I was dead," he confessed. And in a place like Polar Owl, that's not hyperbole, it's reality. Then there's Nurpashi Kulayev, the last surviving terrorist from the Beslan school siege, a 2004 attack that ended with the deaths of 333 hostages, many of them children. Kulayev, one of the most reviled criminals in Russia, was confined to a space so small he couldn't stretch out to sleep. For years, he remained isolated, barely speaking, deprived of natural light, warmth, and human contact. His punishment wasn't a life sentence, it was an erasure. There's no glory, no martyrdom, and certainly no legacy in Polar Owl, just cold silence. Yevgeny Anatolyevich, nicknamed the Orphan of Solikamsk, was another serial slayer who entered the prison full of defiance. Between December 2006 and January 2007, he brutally slayed 6 people. Like others before him, he was sentenced to life in Polar Owl. But within a few years, he unraveled completely. By 2016, he had taken his own life inside the prison. He's now buried in the frozen graveyard just beyond the prison walls, alongside hundreds of other inmates whose families never claimed them. That graveyard isn't just a resting place. It's a symbol. Families of the men held at Polar Owl often refuse to retrieve their bodies, ashamed of the crimes, and perhaps thankful they're gone. Prisoners are buried anonymously in the snow, their graves marked with numbers instead of names. Death here is not a release. It's a quiet vanishing. And it's not just the infamous inmates who fade. The vast majority of Polar Owl's prisoners are locked in total obscurity. No letters, no calls, no visits for the first 10 years of their sentence. Even then, most never receive anyone. There's nothing left to say. No one left to hear it. What breaks them isn't just the cold or the silence. It's the knowledge that no one will remember them. Not the world, not their victims, not even their families. They're not just imprisoned, they're erased. For the few who try to resist, the result is always the same. Polar Owl has never had a successful escape, and if death doesn't come swiftly, the mental decay does. These are men who once controlled the lives of others, terrorists, serial and mass slayers, now reduced to ghosts in steel boxes, pacing alone with only their guilt for company. But Polar Owl isn't the only icy abyss. There's another place, equally remote, where survival depends on obedience, and one man's mysterious death would thrust it into global headlines. Life inside a living icebox. At Polar Owl, every day feels like a punishment. Not because of the guards, but because of the cold. The Arctic winds don't just howl outside the prison walls. They cut straight through the lives of the inmates inside. Polar Owl isn't heated like a normal facility. In fact, it's often colder inside than it is outdoors, and what little heat does exist is carefully controlled. For most prisoners, each morning doesn't begin with an alarm. It begins with the bite of cold air on skin and the realization that their sentence hasn't ended. It's only just started again. The clothing issued to prisoners is startlingly insufficient. Inmates wear light, synthetic uniforms, thin enough to feel the freeze in seconds. No thermal layers, no proper boots. No gloves unless you've earned them through good behavior. These uniforms might be enough for a temperate Russian city, but not in a place where temperatures routinely drop below 50 degrees Celsius, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. And yet, these are the only clothes they'll have, indoors and out. Every day, prisoners are allowed 90 minutes of exercise. But calling it that is misleading. It's not exercise, it's exposure. Inmates are herded into concrete outdoor pens, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, topped with iron grates. The sky is visible but unreachable. The sun rarely shines. And there's no protection from the cold. In some sessions, prisoners are ordered to stand perfectly still. If anyone moves, rubs their hands together, stamps their feet, even shivers, the entire group is punished. Guards are known to bring out water cannons, blasting prisoners in freezing weather as a collective punishment. One step out of line, and you're soaked and shivering in temperatures that slay wildlife. Inside the cells, the conditions aren't much better. Most cells appear to have radiators, but they're often fake. Just painted-on images of heaters, designed to give the illusion of warmth. The real heating, if it exists, is barely functional. And if a prisoner dares to challenge authority or complain about their cell temperature, the guards reportedly retaliate by shutting off water valves, reducing the room's temperature even further. Temperatures of 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, inside the cell become the norm, and that's in the good moments. During inspections, the heat is briefly turned up. After the inspectors leave, it's dialed right back down. When it comes to sleep, inmates are only allowed to lie down between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. At all other times, they must stand or sit upright. No napping, no reclining, no exceptions. Guards make rounds every 15 minutes to ensure compliance. And if you're caught lying down outside sleep hours, that's enough for a trip to solitary confinement, a punishment cell colder than the rest, darker than the others, and often completely isolated from even the minimal contact prisoners might get in regular cells. Meals are nothing more than repetition. Soup, soup, and more soup. There's little nutritional variety and rarely any hot beverages. You don't eat to enjoy. You eat to survive. Some prisoners lose weight rapidly, not just from the lack of calories, but from the way the cold devours the body's energy. There are no warm cafeterias. Food is handed through slots in the cell doors, a mechanical transaction, never a human moment. Even the small privileges, like watching a movie or listening to the radio, are tightly controlled. Prisoners never choose the content. Instead, state-approved broadcasts are piped in, often as propaganda or demoralizing media. These breaks from routine aren't entertainment. They're reminders of control. No matter how long they've been inside, prisoners never adjust. Human bodies aren't designed for this. Human minds even less so. Every breath fogs in the air, a constant reminder that your world has shrunk to a steel box in the most brutal climate on Earth. And while Polar Owl breaks the spirit through isolation and frostbite, its twin prison, the one that made international headlines, is where rebellion dies in total darkness. Polar Wolf, twin hell Dark legacy. Polar Owl may be the most feared prison in Russia, but its equally ruthless counterpart lies just across the icy tundra. Known as Polar Wolf, or officially Correctional Facility Number 3, IK3, this Arctic prison entered the global spotlight in 2024 when one of its most high-profile inmates, Alexei Navalny, Russia's leading opposition figure, was found dead under highly suspicious circumstances. But for those familiar with Polar Wolf's horrific reputation, his death was no surprise. It was simply the latest tragedy in a facility already known as a graveyard for hope. Located in Karp, the same frozen settlement that houses Polar Owl, Polar Wolf is Russia's secretive punishment machine, built in the same era and under the same brutal logic as its twin. The climate here is no more forgiving. The winters are eternal, the sun is a rumor, and temperatures often plunge below 45 degrees Celsius, 49 degrees Fahrenheit. The town itself exists solely to serve the prison and its guards. There is no community, only control. Inside Polar Wolf, the system operates on a doctrine of legalized torture. Former inmates and human rights lawyers describe a routine that is less about incarceration and more about systematic psychological collapse. Inmates are frequently sent to punitive isolation cells, also known as schizo, for trivial or fabricated offenses. Navalny himself was sent to solitary 27 separate times during his brief stay, sometimes for things as minor as leaving a button undone or failing to greet a guard fast enough. These isolation cells are freezing, cramped, and nearly devoid of basic necessities. There are no heating systems, just two pipes running water in and out of the cell. When inmates complain about the cold, guards retaliate by simply shutting the valve, dropping the cell temperature to near freezing levels. During inspections, the heat is briefly turned on to present a false image of humane treatment. Then it's shut off the moment the visitors leave. Physical punishment is equally cruel. One former prisoner recalled being dragged into the courtyard in the middle of winter, dressed in light clothes and forced to stand motionless for 30 to 40 minutes in sub-zero temperatures. Any movement, a twitch, a stomp, even a shiver, was met with instant punishment. The entire group would be blasted with a high-pressure water cannon, turning men into ice statues in real time. It wasn't just torture. It was theater, designed to make an example of resistance. And then came the mosquitoes. In spring, the punishment didn't stop. It evolved. Biting flies and swarms of mosquitoes would cover the prisoners. Again, they were not allowed to move. If a man dared to swat an insect away, the same punishment followed. Drenched in cold water, humiliated, and left to dry or freeze in the Arctic wind. Communication, as in Polar Owl, is tightly restricted. Phones are banned, letters are censored or withheld. Prisoners are discouraged from forming any relationships, even with cellmates. Snitching is rewarded, and inmates are trained to see each other as threats. There is no solidarity, only survival. Medical care is practically non-existent. One human rights lawyer explained it this way: if you go to them with a headache, they give you a pill for diarrhea. Liver pain? Same pill. Doesn't matter, that's all you'll get. And because Polar Wolf is so remote, trained doctors rarely work there. Inmates with serious health conditions are left untreated, or worse, punished for faking. Alexei Navalny's death was announced as a sudden loss of consciousness after a walk. But no one buys that. 3 days after his last release from solitary confinement, he was thrown back in again for the 27th time. Then he died. No investigation, no explanation, just silence. The same silence that swallows all inmates here, whether political prisoners or career criminals. In Polar Wolf, you don't just lose your freedom. You lose your voice, your warmth, your very sense of being human. But believe it or not, one man thought he could escape it all. What happened to him became a warning to every prisoner who followed. Escape becomes its own death sentence. In most prisons, escape is a distant fantasy. In Russia's Polar Owl and Polar Wolf, it's a guaranteed death sentence, just delayed by frostbite, starvation, or bloodthirsty dogs. Surviving these Arctic fortresses isn't just about following the rules, it's about not breaking under the weight of hopelessness. Because once that happens, a prisoner might actually try to run. And that's when the worst punishment begins. The most infamous escape attempt from Polar Owl happened in 2011, when Alexander Elistratov, a man already notorious as the bloody taxi driver, decided he'd rather die fighting than rot away in silence. Between 2005 and 2007, Elistratov slayed 6 passengers he picked up as a cab driver. For that, he was sentenced to life and sent to Polar Owl. But unlike others who eventually succumbed to the psychological collapse, Elistratov held on to one final delusion: escape. His plan was desperate, crude, and doomed from the start. During a supervised walk, Elistratov managed to jam a door open with a piece of iron, then made a run for it. He scaled one of the perimeter fences, but didn't make it far. What he didn't know was that 20 Caucasian shepherd dogs were already waiting on the other side. The guards had trained them for moments like this. As Elistratov landed on the other side of the fence, they were released. The dogs tore into him almost instantly. Guards had to call them off to prevent a full-blown mauling. Elistratov was dragged back inside, covered in blood. His injuries grave. He was placed into solitary confinement, and a few months later, he died of his wounds. Not only did his escape fail, his death was slower, colder, and more agonizing than any bullet. After the incident, the prison added even more layers of fencing. Escape attempts ceased. Not because the security got better, but because the inmates finally understood what it really meant. There's no outside world for them to return to. No allies, no shelter, no trees, roads, or cities. Just the Arctic tundra, where polar bears won't even tread, and temperatures can slay in minutes. Even if an escapee managed to breach all the physical barriers, past the locked cells, past the multiple iron doors, past the towers and dogs, they'd still be 3 days' travel from civilization. That's assuming they know which way to go. Without food, winter gear, or a single landmark, it's a race against death. Starvation, hypothermia, predators, or simply the snow swallowing your tracks and your body. That's what makes Polar Owl and Polar Wolf different. They don't just keep people in, they weaponize the terrain itself. The cold becomes a wall. The silence becomes a cage. There's no hope for a helicopter rescue, no disguises, no prison riots to hide within. Escape is death sentence by environment, slow and excruciating. Even among guards, this is no place for compassion. Their job is survival too. Former inmates recall how guards rarely spoke, except to give orders. They didn't joke, didn't show emotion, didn't pretend this place was normal. It's not. Guards were often rotated in and out of duty to prevent them from losing their sanity, just like the inmates. Polar Owl doesn't need electric chairs or firing squads. Its capital punishment is built into its design. If you try to run, you freeze. If you stay, you wither. No one has ever successfully escaped, and no one ever will. Because outside those fences, the cold doesn't forgive. It finishes what the walls begin. Some prisons in Russia are even worse. Not colder, but hotter, more crowded, and crawling with sickness and death. One of them is so brutal, it makes even Polar Owl seem livable. System built to break the soul. If polar owl and polar wolf are prisons of cold, silence, and solitude, then Butyrka is their infernal opposite, a place so overcrowded, sweltering, and disease-ridden that even the most hardened criminals have described it as hell on earth. Located in central Moscow, Butyrka is Russia's oldest operating prison, built in the 18th century during the reign of Catherine the Great. But time has not dulled its cruelty. It has only sharpened it. Unlike the desolate cold of Karp's polar colonies, Butyrka traps its inmates in unbearable heat. Summers in Moscow can exceed 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and in Butyrka's tightly packed, poorly ventilated cells, that heat becomes lethal. There's no air conditioning, no airflow, and no space to breathe, literally. Designed to house 10 people per cell, many rooms now hold more than 100 prisoners. Bodies are stacked on bunks, crammed onto floors, squeezed into corners. There isn't enough space to sit, let alone lie down. This chaos breeds disease. Tuberculosis runs rampant. AIDS spreads like wildfire. Inmates often arrive healthy and leave in coffins. Or worse, they don't leave at all. Former inmates have described being forced to share a single needle among dozens of prisoners. That's not an exaggeration. It's a brutal fact of life inside Butyrka. Illegal substance use is widespread, smuggled in through corrupt guards, and in this overcrowded nightmare, hygiene is non-existent. And unlike the icy silence of polar owl, Butyrka is loud with desperation. Shouting, screaming, groaning, it never stops. New arrivals are often thrown in with the sick and dying. No separation, no triage, no mercy. The stench of sweat, waste, and untreated infections clings to every corner. Prisoners die not just from violence or disease, but from neglect. Guards here don't need dogs or water cannons. They let overpopulation and suffering do the work. Medical care is a joke. Infections fester for weeks. Fevers burn unchecked. Mental health? Non-existent. The punishment cells, already small, become sweltering boxes of suffocation in the summer. Prisoners are thrown in naked, or worse, in wet clothes that never dry. They shiver at night, sweat by day, and rot in between. One of the worst features of Butyrka is its transport system. Vans used to move inmates between court and prison are just as crowded as the cells, if not more. Sick prisoners are crammed in with the healthy. Those with open sores, coughing fits, or active TB ride inches away from others, infecting them before they even reach their trial. It's not a mistake, it's the system. Butyrka doesn't house just common criminals. It's also a political prison, where dissidents, opposition leaders, and journalists have been locked up alongside slayers and mobsters. During the Soviet era, it was infamous for holding revolutionaries, spies, and traitors. Today, that legacy continues, only now, the line between political prisoner and violent offender is blurred. Escape is nearly impossible, not because of advanced tech or impenetrable walls, but because no one survives long enough to try. Those who do try to flee, or even resist, face brutal beatings. One story tells of 3 men, Boris, Vladimir, and Anatoly, who dug through a small hole during their courtyard time. They even bought a map from a corrupt guard. They escaped, but didn't make it far. 2 were caught within weeks. The third lasted a year before being arrested during a robbery attempt. All 3 are back behind bars for life. Russia's polar owl isn't just a prison. It's a slow, freezing erasure of the human spirit. Inmates enter with screams and swagger and are reduced to silence and frostbite. Here, time isn't a number. It's a weapon. So, do these men deserve it? Are such brutal conditions ever justified, no matter the crime? Or does this prison say more about the system than the sinners? If you found this deep dive chilling, Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And check out the next video for more dark corners of the world you were never meant to see.